He was born in a hospital in Santa Ana, California, on September 12, 1984. American soil, an American passport by birthright. And in July of 2026, the United States government printed his name in an official counterterrorism guide and handed him a title no U.S. citizen has ever carried before. Supreme leader of the most violent drug network in Mexico. His name is Juan Carlos Valencia Gonzalez, though almost nobody says it that way. On the street, in intelligence files, and in the songs now playing across northern Mexico, he answers to two numbers, L03. How a man raised with dual citizenship ended up commanding an army of gunmen is odd enough on its own, but he was never the only one reaching for the throne. And the man standing across from him was born less than a single day later, in a different country, into a completely different world. The whole struggle began with a body in the mountains. On February 22nd, 2026, Mexican soldiers pushed into the town of Tapalpa in the state of Jalisco. And by the time the operation ended, the man who had ruled this cartel for more than a decade was dead, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes. For years, people traded rumors that he was already dying, that his kidneys had failed, that he could barely stand on his own. Those stories were wrong. He fell in a shootout with the army, not in a hospital bed. And the instant he went down, a question that had been buried for years cracked wide open. Who takes over now? The answer would split one of the planet's most feared criminal organizations into two rival camps, each led by a man born within 24 hours of the other, each convinced the empire belonged to him alone. To follow the fight, you have to travel back to a late summer in Guadalajara. On August 31st, 2009, in that western Mexican city, Oseguera Cervantes and a small group of regional figures assembled a new organization. They named it the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Over the following 10 years, it swelled from a local operation into something that reached across oceans, moving product, weapons, and cash on a scale that pulled the eyes of governments far beyond Mexico's borders. It built routes, forged alliances, and enforced discipline through fear. Its founder turned into a phantom the authorities chased and never quite caught. By the time soldiers closed in on him in 2026, he had spent years slipping through every net thrown his way. And when he finally fell, everyone inside the organization understood that what came next would be brutal. That empire ran on one principle for over a decade. A single man at the center, with everything flowing to him and from him. He held the routes, the partnerships, and the loyalty in his own hands through personal trust, rather than any formal chain of command. That design made the cartel efficient and frightening. It also carried a hidden flaw. When power rests entirely on one person, that person becomes the whole machine, and removing him leaves nothing obvious to keep the gears turning. The government grasped this, which is part of why the hunt lasted so long. Washington placed a price of $15 million on his head for information leading to his arrest. That figure was never only about one criminal. It reflected a belief that toppling him might collapse everything he held together. February 2026 finally put that theory to the test. So how does a criminal empire pick its next king when there is no election? No written will? No clear line of inheritance? Subscribe to the channel, because the answer shows how power actually moves inside these organizations. And once you notice the pattern, you start saying it in places you never expected. Here is the detail that makes this story hard to believe. The two men fighting for control were born one day apart. Juan Carlos Valencia Gonzalez arrived on September 12, 1984, in California. Ricardo Ruiz Velasco arrived on September 13, 1984, in Guadalajara, Jalisco. The same generation, the same age, almost to the hour. Two boys born on opposite sides of the border, who would grow up to aim the same weapons at each other decades later. Ruiz Velasco goes by a nickname built from the initials of his name, LRR, the double R. Where L03 stands for family, money, and connections, LRR stands for something colder and more direct. Raw force. That gap between the two of them, finance on one hand and firepower on the other, would decide the future of the entire operation. The first thing worth understanding about L03 is what he is not. He is not the biological son of the man who died in Tapalpa. That mistake gets repeated often, and it changes the whole picture. His real father was Armando Valencia Cornelio, a founder of an earlier group known as the Milenio Cartel. His mother, Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia, came from a clan wired deeply into the money side of the trade. L03 became tied to the fallen leader through marriage, as a stepson, not through blood. That single fact shapes how he thinks and how he moves. He grew up near the accounting, the laundering, the quiet machinery that turns street cash into clean assets and legitimate holdings. He is a businessman before he is a commander. And that upbringing gave him something his rival could never claim. A financial network that runs far deeper than any one leader. If Bloodline settled these matters, the crown would have gone elsewhere entirely. The dead leader did father a biological son, a man known as El Mencho, and many once assumed he would inherit the operation. Instead, he sits inside a prison cell in the United States, pulled out of the game, unable to direct anything from behind those walls. So the direct family line had already snapped before the succession battle even started. That empty space is exactly what dragged L03 and LRR toward collision. With the obvious heir locked away on foreign soil, the seat suddenly stood open to whoever could seize it. One man carried the family fortune, the other carried the guns, and neither had any intention of stepping aside for the other. LRR did not rise through spreadsheets and bank accounts. He rose through fields and firefights. He built his name as a commander of the cartel's heavily armed strike units, the men sent forward when the organization needed to project pure power. Plenty of people assume the next boss of a cartel gets chosen the way a corporation appoints a chief executive, through family ties and orderly inheritance. The reality is harsher. Real authority usually belongs to whoever controls the most loyal fighters. And for years that person was LRR. He ran an elite armed group that answered to him personally, not to a boardroom. When the leader in the mountains wanted something enforced, this was the hand that enforced it. And a commander with that kind of devotion below him rarely bows to an accountant. The clearest snapshot of who LRR really is comes from a night in June of 2022. Military intelligence had been chasing his location for a long stretch, and then he handed it to them through a mistake that reads like a lesson in vanity. He threw a party at a private ranch tucked into the mountains, and he could not resist inviting his favorite folk singer to perform for the crowd. The musician showed up, played his set, and afterward posted clips of the celebration to social media. Those short videos delivered something no informant had managed to provide: his exact coordinates. A man who could vanish into the countryside for months at a time was pinpointed because he wanted a private concert badly enough to let the cameras keep rolling. When the military acted on that footage, they saw the true scale of what they faced. A convoy of 20 armored vehicles rolling toward the ranch. This was no small-time operator hiding in a shack. This was a private army on wheels. The army launched an operation to capture him in Guadalajara in August of that year, and the answer came back instantly and coordinated. His forces drowned the city in chaos. They hijacked cars, threw up burning roadblocks, and turned ordinary streets into a threat aimed at the state. 17 businesses and vehicles, most of them convenience stores and pharmacies, went up in flames as his men tried to pressure the government into backing off. The message need no translation. Touch our commander, and the entire city pays the price. If the size of this is landing for you, take a second to hit like. It genuinely helps push this to more people trying to understand how these organizations really function, past the headlines. The most haunting chapter of LRR's story has nothing to do with soldiers or convoys. It revolves around a young woman with a camera. On May 13th, 2025, a social media influencer named Valeria Marquez sat inside her beauty salon in Zapopan, Jalisco, streaming live to her followers, the way she did on most afternoons. Partway through the broadcast, a gunman walked through the door. He shot her 4 times while the stream kept running. U.S. investigators later connected her death to a private romantic relationship she had carried on with LRR. A secret bond, ending in public, in real time, in front of an audience who believed they were watching an ordinary day unfold. It served as a reminder that the violence surrounding these men never stays contained in the mountains. That killing drew attention from far beyond Mexico. On June 18th, 2025, the United States Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control formally sanctioned LRR. The listing cited his violent operations and, in particular, his control over the cartel's propaganda networks. That last piece matters more than it first appears. He did not simply command fighters. He shaped how the organization presented itself to the public, how it manufactured fear and loyalty through images and carefully aimed messaging. A man who holds both the weapons and the story is an unusually dangerous rival to have. And by the summer of 2025, the government had marked him publicly as one of the recognized faces of the whole operation. So when the leader fell in February of 2026, Every piece was in place for a collision. On one side stood L03, carrying his family's fortune and its clean financial channels. On the other stood LRR, carrying the trust of the men who actually pull triggers. This is the central tension inside every cartel succession: money against muscle. The businessman who can fund an empire against the commander who can defend it in the dirt. In most organizations, one eventually swallows the other whole. The question hanging over Jalisco in early 2026 was which model would prevail, and whether the handover would happen through quiet negotiation or through open bloodshed in the streets. The answer to who was rising did not arrive in a police report or a government briefing. It arrived in a song. LO3's climb was announced, of all places, on the radio. Two well-known musicians, Natanael Cano and Gabito Ballesteros, released a track called Presidente, and the lyrics openly celebrated L3 taking control of the organization. The song even claimed he was buying weapons directly from Russia. In this world, popular music often broadcasts news that officials refuse to confirm for months. Before any agency printed his name in any file, the clubs and the car speakers were already singing about the new man at the top. Culture ran ahead of the government, and it ran fast. The formal confirmation came in July of 2026. The United States National Counterterrorism Center updated its anti-terrorism guide and officially named L03 as the new top leader of the cartel. That single document turned a rumorung in nightclubs into an established fact recognized by a foreign power. A man born in a California hospital, holding an American passport since the day he drew breath, now appeared in his own country's records as the head of one of the most violent criminal networks on Earth. The businessman had taken the chair, but writing a leader's name onto paper and controlling every rifle in the field are two very different things. And the gap between them is where this story turns dangerous. The seat was never fully secured. In July of 2026, security analysts described something far messier than a clean handover. The organization had fractured into two wings. One is a political and business faction led by L03, resting on his family's money laundering machine and its debt financial roots. The other is a harder, more violent military faction driven by regional commanders like LRR, men who put their faith in force over finance. It no longer resembles a company under one boss. It looks like two philosophies sharing a single name, each with its own resources, its own leadership, and its own idea of what the cartel should become in the years ahead. You might picture two rival factions trading gunfire across the streets. They are not, at least not out in the open. Through the summer of 2026, both sides pulled back. On July 6, 2026, Mexico lodged just 25 murders in a single day. A historically low count for a country accustomed to far worse. The reason was not peace. It was calculation. With the 2026 World Cup drawing global cameras toward the region, the factions chose to stay quiet, avoiding the kind of bloodshed that invites international crackdowns. Even a civil war, as it turns out, can be paused when the right audience is watching. That silence is not stability. It is a held breath. Security experts describe a tense standoff rather than any true resolution, two camps studying each other, waiting for the moment when the cameras leave and the math shifts again. The businessman controls the money. The commander controls the fighters. Neither has forced the other to kneel, and neither can fully erase his rival without ripping the whole organization apart at the seams. So they wait. And the longer that wait stretches on, the more the shape of the future rides on. Which kind of power, finance, or firepower proves stronger once the pressure finally comes back. This fracture reveals how these organizations are shifting. The old design placed a single figure at the summit, a phantom the authorities pursued for years, holding everything together through personal loyalty. That is why one man alone could carry an entire empire. What is forming now looks nothing like it. A structure that may harden into a corporate wing and a warrior wing, one washing money through legitimate-looking channels while the other holds ground through violence. If that division sets like concrete, Mexico may no longer be confronting one cartel. It may be confronting two, grown from the same root, and pointed in opposite directions. At the heart of all of it remain two men born a day apart in 1984. One raised near accountants and quiet fortunes. One forged in the mountains and the strike units. They have spent their entire lives drifting toward this exact confrontation, without ever planning a single step of it. The businessman whose passport names him a citizen of the country now hunting him. The commander whose pride once gave away his hideout through a clip posted online. Their rivalry is not entertainment. It is a live question about who will hold the most feared organization in the region and whether that organization even survives the answer. For now, the throne sits between them, claimed on paper by one, and defended in the field by the other, held inside an uneasy quiet that nobody believes will hold. A U.S. citizen named as the boss of a foreign cartel. A commander who set a city ablaze to save his own skin. A young woman shot on a live stream because of who she chose to love. These are not separate tales. They are pieces of one struggle over who inherits an empire built by a man no longer alive to name his heir. An empire that may split in two before either rival ever wins it outright. If this pulled you in and you want to follow the forces reshaping this part of the world, like and subscribe, because the next chapter of this fight is still being written.